Last week, I gave a talk about the essence of Teshuvah. Since these are days of Teshuvah, we decided to do several weeks of Teshuvah, the various aspects of Teshuvah, the essence of Teshuvah, awakening to Teshuvah, what Teshuvah will be like during the days of Mashiach, which Hashem will cover in the next 2 weeks. The Teshuvah revolution that's happening today in Eretz Israel and all over the world. Last week, it was more of a discussion as to what Teshuvah is. And I did point out that Teshuvah is important. It's not something that we can ignore. It is essential. One needs to return to his roots. One needs to be on the right track if one wants to reach his destination. But somehow, a lot of people do not realize that they're going towards a certain destination. And it's a little funny, it's strange, because have you ever met somebody that's driving that doesn't know where he's going? Or have you ever met somebody in the bus and asked him where you're going and say, no, I don't know where I'm going? I think most people know where they're going. Well, at least they want to go somewhere. They may not end up there, but that's a whole different story. Whether they do or not, it's not up to them. They at least get on the bus, at least take out a map and head where they're, heads towards their destination. Whether they end up there or not depends on other factors. But life does have a destination. We all have a mission. We're all here for a purpose. But people apparently are living their lives without a sense of where they're headed, what they're here for. And it shouldn't be so, because anybody that pays close attention to life, to all that's involved in living in this world, realize that there's a lot of responsibilities. Apparently, those who understand and believe that Hashem created the world obviously understand, just common sense, that He created it for a reason. And we are part of this creation. And we all have a job. But somehow people forget about it or they ignore it. And if they choose to ignore it, as I explained last week, then they're no really different than the animals that are just existing in this world. But it can't be that the human being is just existing. We are told that the human being is Nezer HaBriyah. He's the crown of creation. There's something special about him. And he has to pay more attention. The human being is smarter, and he must realize if something is wrong. We're driving, and a certain light turns on our dashboard. We immediately, hopefully, stop the car and look into the problem. That's exactly what I just did a couple days ago. All of a sudden, a light turns on my dashboard. Check gauges. I said, oh man, that didn't happen for a long time. Check gauges. I look at my gauges, and sure enough, one of the gauges, the temperature of the water, was going up. It usually is in the middle. The fan is working, the water is working, the water pump is working. Usually that gauge is in the middle. All of a sudden, it was turning. I had to stop the car immediately, otherwise it was going to overheat. And of course I was going somewhere, so I was a little bit upset that I had to stop the car. But, of course, we don't want to ruin the car. So I got out and checked the car, and sure enough, guess what? I was almost out of water. Out of water? Yeah. Well, how do you become out of water? There must be a leak. In the meantime, Baruch Hashem, I had prepared. I always take with myself in the car an extra. What is that? No, a container, an extra container of water. So I was able to continue on my trip. And of course, the next step would be to go to the mechanic and see what the problem really is. But it's a good thing that there was a gauge, that there was a signal, that there was something wrong. Human body also has signals that something is wrong. The person has too much sugar. At some point, he feels it, right? But should he wait till the moment he feels it? No, he should check himself from time to time. And there are ways to check your blood, your sugar level. And the same is true with Teshuvah. Teshuvah, we're being asked to check if we're on the right track. And all of Am Yisrael, all of humanity, but especially Am Yisrael, has a particular goal, where they're headed, what they need to accomplish. And they have to check themselves from time to time. If they're doing the right thing, if they're headed there, or there's something they need to correct. That is what Teshuvah is all about. And last week we explained that in order for Teshuvah to come about, certain requirements, certain conditions need to exist in the individual. And if they're there, the chances are that the thoughts of Teshuvah at least will come about. He will think about it. Is he going to take action? That's a whole different story. But at least he will think about it. It will cross his mind. Especially comes Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, he will stop and reflect. If those conditions are there, they exist in him, then he will go about doing Teshuvah. There are, however, some individuals, and I need to just briefly mention a little bit about them too, that they think that to be a good Jew, is enough to have a good heart. No ma'asim are required, no deeds are necessary. But that's so silly. Have you ever seen somebody come to work one day and tell the supervisor, today I'm not doing any work, I'm just going to be smiling at everybody and have a good heart and be kind to everybody. But you have a job, 8 to 5, you got to accomplish. Work's got to be done. What good is your good heart? But that's what some Jews really believe, that it is enough to be a good Jew at heart. If you have a good heart, that's it. The Torah requires ma'asim, requires deeds. And if we do not do our job properly, then we have to make amends. Otherwise, Chaz v'Shalom, we can be fired. Which leads us to the next point. There's a mishpat these days. These are days of judgment. But why do we have to think about the day of judgment? We should be thinking about Teshuvah regardless of the day of judgment. A lot of people think that the reason I need to do Teshuvah is because there's a day of judgment coming. I better clean up my act. Otherwise, he's going to be upset at me. That's true, but that's not the reason we should be doing Teshuvah. Teshuvah should happen every day. Teshuvah should happen anytime we realize we made a mistake. I always like to use the example of an off-ramp. We're on the wrong freeway. We finally figure out that we're headed in the wrong direction. We hopefully get off and we make a U-turn and we get back on the right freeway. I think everybody would do that. Do we wait to the mishpat? Do we wait to something to happen? No. If we become aware that something was not done right, then we try to correct it. That's called Teshuvah. So Teshuvah is important if we want to get to that final destination. This is just an introduction to what we're going to cover today. Today, B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to cover how does one awaken to do Teshuvah. We know by now what Teshuvah is. We know that Teshuvah is important. We know what conditions need to exist in order for one to do Teshuvah. But how does one awaken? What is lacking? And this is a very important talk because a lot of people out there are somewhat aware of what Teshuvah is, and perhaps even will admit that some of the things they did are wrong, but nevertheless they don't take any action towards the Teshuvah. And that's very important that we figure out the psychology behind those who are observant Jews, observant. In other words, they have the conditions for Teshuvah. They are aware, they know what they're supposed to do, and nevertheless they don't do perfect Teshuvah. We must remember that human being is also like a machine. Machine can break down. We're only human. We can break down. We can make mistakes. And that is why Kadosh Baruch Hu allows for Teshuvah. But we have to take it seriously. These are days that Kadosh Baruch Hu has given us opportunities to do Teshuvah. Even though it's something that we should be doing a whole year, He basically stops us. We blow the shofar, we remind ourselves. So this is a little bit more heavy-duty reminder than the rest of the year when we were supposed to think about it just by the words we express in the prayers. Slach lanu avinu, Ana, right? We say, Ashamnu, Baganu. I mean, every day is full of Teshuvah. But we don't pay attention to the words we're saying, and we just overlook the fact that maybe there is something that we need to correct. The reason why we say it so many times a day is because it's very possible we did something wrong on that day. From the moment we woke up until the moment we went to sleep, even before Kriyat Shema Lamita, if you say the whole Nusach of the Kriyat Shema before you go to sleep, there is also Vidui. Chaz v'Shalom, a person may not wake up the next morning. So it's better that he says something before he goes to sleep. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about Itorerut Teshuvah. In other words, how does one awaken to do Teshuvah? How does that come about? Why does it happen to some more than to others? Why do people have a hard time with it? So I'm going to share with you a story that some of you may have heard from me, but it's a very moving story, and there's something to be learned from it. Many years ago, there was a Jewish couple that had to run away, had to get out of town. They had a baby boy. He must have been the most a year old. They had to leave him behind. They had some good neighbors, non-Jewish neighbors, and they felt that perhaps that was the best place to keep him. Hopefully one day they will come back and pick up the child. You know, during the Holocaust, there were many such families that had to run away, and it was too risky to take their children with them. And they went to their neighbors, their Polish neighbors, hopefully thinking that these neighbors will help them out. They even brought them all the jewelry. Take all the money you want, just hold on to our child till we come back after the war is over. Many of these kids ended up in churches. These Polish families either did not want to take care of the child or wanted to do what they thought was a big mitzvah. It was the Havdil Elef Avot, to baptize, the child. And till today, you have many, many children, today they're adults, senior citizens, who in reality are Jewish. They may or may not know about this. But anyway, this little baby grew up not knowing that he was Jewish in a non-Jewish home. This couple had no kids of their own. And they took care took care of him. When the child was close to the age of bar mitzvah, he has a dream. A woman appears to him in a dream, and she tells him, I'm your real mother, you are a Jew, and your bar mitzvah is coming up. Leave the home, go to the closest Jewish community, where you will find people who will help you, you will become bar mitzvah, and you will live a Jewish life. A child, 13 years old, seeing a dream, did not pay attention to it, but the dream came back, repeated itself, until one day he decides, you know what, he better approach his parents, what he thought were his parents. And at first they said, no, you are a child, we love you very much. But he insisted that they tell him the truth. And finally, they told him, yes, we adopted you. Your parents left you behind because they had to run away. And it's true. But nevertheless, we love you very much. We'll take care of you. This is your home. And it was a very warm home. He had no reason to leave. They made him feel very good. But now, of course, he's really confused. Knowing the truth, what is he supposed to do? This is a child, 13-year-old boy. What should he do? His adopted parents are taking care of him, looking after him. But the mother came back one more time and she says, you need to leave right away. Your bar mitzvah is coming up and you're a Jew and you have certain responsibilities. He went back to his parents and he says, they're telling me to leave. And they tell him, don't leave, just stay, we'll take care of you. It was a struggle. One day, his adopted mother takes out a siddur. By the way, this used to belong to your mother. It was a prayer book, a siddur. She says, keep this as a souvenir. Maybe that will make you feel better. She tried, to do whatever she can to calm him, to make sure that he stays. He takes a look at the siddur, he opens up the siddur, and he sees page by page almost, is drenched with tears. You know how you can tell that there were tears? Because it's stained. The pages, almost every page of that siddur was stained with the tears of the mother. And of course, he was amazed. This woman shed so many tears on this prayer book. Why was she crying? But of course, he put two and two together, she coming to him in the dream, and the siddur and the prayer, and he knew what a prayer book was, because he was growing up in a Catholic home. So he realized that, his real mother cried many, many years apparently. Who knows for what she cried. But it moved him very much that one day he decided, no matter what happens, he's going to run away early in the morning and do as his real mother told him to do. And he ran away, he joined the Jewish community, became bar mitzvah there, and grew up an observant Jew. That is the basis of this story. The question is, where did he take the courage, a child, to do that? He's growing up as a non-Jew, he's 13 years old, his adopted parents, non-Jewish, are taking good care of him. Why should he leave? What pushed him on?
Depends who he is.
Yeah.
There's a spark in every...
There's a spark, but it takes a lot of courage. Well, the tears moved him too, but it still takes a lot of courage to just leave your warm home where you're comfortable, where you grew up thinking these are your parents, and just believe in a dream. Well, in order to understand what went on in the child's mind, we have to ask ourselves the question that I began asking. Why is it difficult for some Jews to do Teshuvah? The difficulty lies many times with letting go of our bad habits. It's hard to let go of habits. Habits become second nature. One is in a way shackled, imprisoned by his Yetzer Hara. Every morning we say Neshama Shenatata Bi Tehorahi. The Neshama is pure. The Neshama has the desire and the interest to cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But unfortunately, with our bad habits, we imprison it, or we limit it. We don't allow it to fully express itself, to do as it really wishes. The Neshama Tehorahi, we say. She's pure. But she doesn't get to do what she would like to do, because somehow we don't allow it to. If we would not limit the Neshama, if we would not have bad habits, she would do what she's programmed to do. In other words, she's pure. The will of Hashem. To better understand this, I'd like to use the mashal that I saw once. I think the Magid of Dubna gives the mashal. There were once two neighbors, Reuven and Shimon. Shimon had a cow. And one day, he wakes up, he goes to his barn, and he sees no cow. So he looks around, maybe she left the barn. And all of a sudden, he hears a familiar voice, Moo! That was his cow, coming from the barn of Reuven, from his neighbor. So he goes over to him and says, why did you steal my cow? He says, what are you talking about? It's my cow, I bought the cow. No, it's my cow, it's my cow. What do two Jews do when they have an argument? They go to the rabbi, hopefully. not to the courts. So they went to the rabbi. Rabbi, this is my cow. He stole my cow. And the other one says, I don't know what he's talking about. This is my cow. So the rabbi says, no problem. We'll figure this one out. Let's ask the cow who she belongs to. So they all look at him. Why are you going to do that? There's no problem. Here. Bring the cow to the Beit Din. They brought the cow to the Beit Din. Now the rabbi says, let the cow go, and let's see where she's going to go. To whoever's barn she goes, that's where she belongs. And sure enough, she went to the barn of Shimon. And that's how we know. Don't imprison her, and she will go to wherever she needs to go. It's a mashal, but it's a nice mashal, describing the way the neshama works. If we would not imprison the neshama, if we would allow her to go and to do what she wants, she would do the right things. But we imprison her, we keep her controlled through our bad habits, through the ta'avot, through the desires that we have, things that usually are not always compatible with the Torah. And because of that, the neshama has no opportunity to express itself. That is the beauty of Shabbat, where the physical body is at rest. The neshama has more of a chance to express itself, to feel something else, to do other things that are more spiritual, to learn. We need to put the body to rest. When we fast, something similar happens. We're controlling our physical desires, we're not eating or drinking, and perhaps we feel a little bit more hirhuret Teshuvah, more thoughts of Teshuvah when we're fasting. That is the idea of the fast of Kippur, or Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, Tisha B'Av. In other words, limit the ta'avot of the body, and you may be able to sense a little bit what Hashem wants us to sense, what the neshama should sense, and that is the guilty feelings that the Beit HaMikdash is not rebuilt yet, etc., depending which fast we're talking about. So that is the idea of what happens with an individual who is having a hard time with doing Teshuvah, is because he's imprisoning or limiting his neshama. If he would just allow her to express herself, she would want to do it. And that limitation comes from the bad habits. This child, in the story, he's a child. So his neshama was pure. He must have been also perhaps even a big neshama. But he did not have too many bad habits yet. He's still a child. All he needed was a little bit of a push. So like you mentioned, the siddur with the tears, plus the dream, and perhaps the curiosity of who he really is. Altogether, were able to give him the push, and all he needed was a little push. He did not have too much to hold him back. Bad habits, hergelim, and so forth. And he's pure. Together with a little bit of push from his mother, that's all it took to get him to leave the home. Yes?
Not pure, Rabbi. He's been eating trade all his life. How pure could he be? His soul has been contaminated, by the trade he's been eating.
Right.
How could the spiritual concepts ever...
The neshama is still pure. You're right, when a Jew eats taref, nevelot trefot, he definitely, you can say he's contaminated in a sense, and it may impair his ability to learn and to do other things. But remember, he's a child. Under the age of bar mitzvah, it is not as powerful as if it were to be after the age of 13, when he has to struggle, when he has to exercise free will, and he has to do battle with the Yetzirah much more than before the age of 13. So the child is much more tamim. Tamim means sincere, below the age of bar mitzvah than he is after, when there are many more struggles, many more battles to do with the Yetzirah. Even though he would be more intelligent, perhaps sometimes the intelligence is not so good, because when you have to think about things, you hesitate more. It has to make sense to you, it has to be logical. For a child, it doesn't have to be completely logical. He has to just be excited about it, he has to be somewhat convinced about it, but more important that he has to be moved. And he was moved, and together with the purity of his soul, because like you said, he's fin taliyid, he's a Jew, the neshama, together with the powerful dreams, and it was not one dream, that helped him make his decision. When you see your mother's tears, I think if you're somewhat sensitive, you definitely are moved by this. And that's exactly what he needed. All he needed was a small push, but he still had to make a decision. Yes?
The Jewish community, how they know he's a Jew, Rabbi, take him in,
I think the story was that they made him convert, just because there was a doubt. Or it could be that they knew who he was. I'm not really sure what it was. But either way, if he expressed his desire, and he told them what the story, and he brought his siddur with him, I think that was enough to convince them. So anyways, for us, it's a little bit more difficult than for the child to get ourselves going, to take this important step of making a change in our life, to stop that which we were doing, or to get away from that comfort that we've had. That is why it doesn't come easy. So the Navi tells us, therefore, since it does not come easy, K'hu imachem devarim. When you do Teshuvah, it doesn't say K'hu imachem diburim, take with yourself words. A lot of people just say the words. K'hu imachem devarim, the Prophet is saying, if you want to take the first step and you want to progress, you have to make commitments. Commitment, you have to take upon yourself at least one commitment on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur that you will do this year, something that you were not doing the past year. Either you were not doing, or if it was something bad that you were doing, or to strengthen oneself in an area where one was weak, regardless of what it is. To perfect, to improve, to change. That's what Teshuvah is all about, as we explained last week. Teshuvah involves change. And a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people like things the way they are. To change is very difficult, even to change homes, to move from one house to another. Some people would rather not. They like it the way they are, and it's very difficult for them to change. But that's what Teshuvah requires, is the willingness to make a change if you're convinced that that change is for your benefit. And we know that it's for our benefit. But we either hesitate, we postpone it, or we simply have a hard time. People who are addicted to drugs, alcohol, they really have a hard time. Even if they would want to. It's not easy. So the Navi says one way to go about it is make a commitment. I was explaining before in the halachot that we were talking about the halachot of nedarim and shavuot, that it's not a good idea to make promises, vows. Always say and get used to saying beli neder. It's very dangerous. It's a big responsibility. Even if you plan to keep it, you may forget, right? It's therefore not such a good idea. The only exception to that, or at least there are several exceptions. One is if you're trying to eliminate the bad habit, you're trying to control yourself. You can't give up smoking unless you made a neder. Well, then it could be a mitzvah to make the neder to stop smoking, if that's what it will take. Or to fulfill a mitzvah, the rabbis tell us it's okay for one to encourage himself by saying that he will do so and so, even though it's a neder. Nevertheless, if that will make him do it, it's okay. And then there is a very powerful neder that can make a big difference in one's life, and that is Nodrim B'Sha'ata Sakana. If one is in danger, he's drowning, he should make a neder. That may be the only thing that will save his life. Hashem, I plan to do this and this. Bezrat Hashem, if you get me out of this danger, I commit myself to put on tefillin every day, if that's what he was not doing. Or to put on tzitzit, or to keep Shabbat, or to do this or to do that. People have done that, and that is what saved their lives. Or that is what took them out of their misery. That is what helped them in whatever problem they were. They were about to be thrown in prison for life, or whatever, accused of whatever, something that they were perhaps even guilty of. But because they made a neder, they made a commitment, that commitment could have made a big difference. And I want to assure you that, really neder, that is, I'm very confident that anybody who is in some trouble, not only is it a good thing to do to make a neder, but it may be the only thing that may be left for him to do, and it may work. A couple that has no children, Chas v'shalom. One who's been single for many, many years, and he sees no way out of this problem that he's in. One who has been struggling finding parnasah. Now, all of the examples that I just gave could be that there is a cheshbon milemala. Nothing wrong that he did. There is a cheshbon milemala, but one does not know. One does not know why his situation is such. It may be his mazal, just his bad luck. But so therefore, it's okay, and sometimes it's a good thing for him to try, as a last resort at least, after all his prayers, and after all his supplications, and after the tzedakot, and after going to doctors, whatever his problem is. If this happens to me this year, I make the following neder. Now obviously, your neder cannot be, I will give $5 to charity. It has to be more meaningful, more significant. It has to be something that will make a big roshem lemala. Give you an example. There have been many stories, of tzaddikim, of rabbis, who somehow did not get around to writing a sefer, a book that they needed to write, or that they should have written. Somebody got sick in the family, and they made a neder. They get well with a neder. I will publish the sefer this year, and I will distribute it all over town. And that did it. It was obviously something important that needed to be published. I just gave you a quick example. There have been many stories like this. The neder came out, the neder was expressed, and sure enough, that's what was needed. It may or may not help, but it sometimes should be tried if there's nothing else that can help. So therefore, the reason I mentioned this idea of nedarim, that even though nedarim should be discouraged, We make hatarat nedarim so much during these days because we're concerned about nedarim. But sometimes, be'et sakana, letzorech mitzvah, if that is the only thing that will help us contain ourselves from these bad habits, or to do what we're supposed to do, it may help. So therefore, in contemplating Teshuvah, the same is true. Commit yourself to something. And when one goes before Hashem on the day of judgment, the defense can come and say, hey, here, this is what he committed himself to do this year, and he committed himself sincerely. That's going to be a very powerful presentation when his day in court comes. It's not enough when one comes and says, okay, I'm guilty. Fine, if you say you're guilty, then the prosecution rests its case. But there's still going to be a verdict. We want to avoid the verdict. We want seriha, mechila, kapara for our maasim. We want a second chance. That is what Teshuvah is. Teshuvah is Hashem says, I give you a second chance. I give you a new lease of life. You can begin a new chapter in your life, a new year. What's kapara? I clean. It's more powerful than seriha and mechila. Seriha and mechila involve Hashem postponing, delaying punishment, overlooking it for now. Otherwise, they cause partitions between us and Hashem. We want to be close to Him. We want Him to listen to our prayers. We want to be on His good side. That requires kapara. Whether one did not put on tefillin one day during the year when he should have, he needs a kapara for that. Yom Kippurim will help, as long as he's serious. Or he did something worse. It requires kapara, it requires tikkunim, it requires tzedakah, pidyon, who knows, depending on what he did. But Baruch Hashem, that we have such a special relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that He allows for it. We just don't take advantage of it. And it's again because of our habits, because of either bad habits or simply because we're in the mood of delaying and postponing and pushing things off, as many people do. Oh, I'll take care of this some other time. Right now I'm busy making money. Whatever. People don't think straight about what their priorities should be. And this should be a very important priority. We want to be on His good side. And therefore we do whatever it takes that He should be pleased with us. And if we knowingly did something wrong, then we for sure have to beg for Teshuvah. If we don't know, we also ask for Teshuvah for those things that we're unaware. So therefore, one of the most powerful ways to make the change involves commitment. And in order to eliminate the bad habits, it requires not just a commitment, it can become very difficult. It requires mesirut nefesh, self-sacrifice. It can be very, very hard. For a person, let's say a person made a commitment, every day in the morning, for the entire year, I'm never going to miss minyan. I'm always going to pray in the minyan. You know what kind of a commitment that is? That means if one night you came home late from a wedding at 3 o'clock in the morning, you still have to keep your commitment. You know what? You're better off not going to sleep that night. Because you're going to have a hard time getting up. But that's what commitments are all about. It sometimes involves mesirut nefesh. I like to say that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is like Pesach. In what way? Pesach we cleanse our homes from chametz in preparation of the holiday. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur we have to cleanse ourselves from our stains. Pesach is a time of freedom of the body. We were slaves. Physically we worked hard. And Rosh Hashanah and Kippur is freedom for the neshama, to be able to finally release itself from all the bad habits of the body. In this generation that we are in, many of you heard of the concept Baal Teshuvah. Baal Teshuvah means one who has done Teshuvah. Why is it called Baal? Anybody know? What kind of a word is Baal Teshuvah? The word Baal means the husband or the owner of Teshuvah.
The master.
Or master. Yeah.
Who's mastering the art of Teshuvah?
Maybe you can explain a little bit more. How does one master the art of Teshuvah? What is that?
You never master it, that's why you have Yom Kippur.
Yeah, Yom Kippur definitely helps. But the reason why one is called a Baal Teshuvah is because he has become a true Baal Teshuvah. In other words, he has not just promised and just said he will do something, he has really made Teshuvah a part of him. It has become a part of his life. He acquired the Teshuvah. He's a Baal Teshuvah. As the Rambam points out, how does Hashem know if somebody is a Baal Teshuvah? If this individual is exposed to the exact same challenge that he did in the past, he had, and this time he overcomes the temptations, he holds himself back. In other words, he was presented with the same situation, and he held himself back. Only then we know he's a Baal Teshuvah. Up until then, the promises that he said he's going to do or he's going to not do, we don't know for sure. When he's presented with the same situation and he holds himself back, then he's a real Baal Teshuvah. Anyway, but the term Baal Teshuvah is not necessarily accurate for those who have come from a distance and done Teshuvah, it really applies to every Jew, to every individual who wants to become a better person, who wants to improve himself. He's also called a Baal Teshuvah. As the Zohar points out, there's two kinds of Baal Teshuvah. One who's very far and is coming close. One who's been close all his life and wants to become closer and grow even more. Which one is more difficult to do Teshuvah? The one who's far, believe it or not. The one who's far away, did not eat kosher, did not put on tefillin, did not keep Shabbat. It's easier for him to do Teshuvah than for somebody who's been religious all his life and wants to be even more religious. He wants to be even stronger. It simply is a lot more difficult to climb the ladder. Once you're close and you want to go one step higher, it's more difficult. So even those who are religious, observant Jews, tzaddikim, have it very hard if they want to do Teshuvah. Especially when we're talking about Teshuvah on one's habits. Imagine somebody who's temperamental. He has kas. And he says, you know what, this year I'm going to do Teshuvah on kas. You know how difficult that is? How is he going to control himself when his wife makes him angry? Or a neighbor? Or a child? This is a temperamental person. You know what it takes to control one's anger? No, and there are many such midot, characteristics, that can be difficult. Take somebody who's stingy. We don't understand what stinginess is. Baruch Hashem, we're all very giving and kind, I hope, right? There's no stingy people amongst us. And this guy has a disease. He can't open up his hand to give tzedakah. So it's a bad habit. Or somebody who's lazy. Laziness. So if he makes a commitment not to be lazy, in other words, to get up, to go, to be on time, it will be a tremendous accomplishment. But it's not easy. So therefore, Balei Teshuvah, don't think that when we talk about Balei Teshuvah, we're only referring to those who were gangsters, those who were doing drugs, those who were totally secular, people who were completely on the other side, who have come, Baruch Hashem, and become observant Jews. No, Balei Teshuvah is every one of us who's observant, keeps the mitzvot, but just wants to be a better person, wants to work on his midot. He's also called a Balei Teshuvah. And it's not easy. So therefore, what I always suggest is instead of just talk, instead of just saying Chatanu Avinu Hashamnu, instead of just fasting on Yom Kippur, all of these things are necessary. We need to verbalize our thoughts. That's why we say those things. We go through the whole Avodah of Yom Kippur that the Kohen Gadol did just to bring ourselves into the spirit of the day. This is not an ordinary day. But all of this is not enough. A commitment needs to be made. Believe it or not, people don't realize that that's one of the most important parts of this day, of these days, is to make commitments. If we don't make the actual promise that this year, this is going to change, this specific area of conduct is going to change, then we haven't said anything. We can't just be general. Hashem, forgive us. We did something wrong. I don't know what, but we did something. You know what we did. That's very good if you really don't know. But I don't think anybody can make that claim that he doesn't know anything specifically that he did wrong that needs to be perfected, that needs to be corrected. So we have to be specific. In the long vidui that the Sephardim have especially, there's just about anything you can think of. It's an alphabet of whatever that was done wrong. From eating something without checking if it had a supervision, it's okay. Probably it's okay. After all, I don't see any pork in it. People are very lax and lenient when it comes to ashgacha. It's okay, It has a K, yeah, but a K may not be enough, So, from the smallest things that we take for granted to the more serious avonot, one has to think a little bit about it, review his year, and make a decision. Why only one commitment? Because the rabbi tells, tafasta merubeh lo tafasta. If you're going to take too many things upon yourself, you won't do anything. And that is, by the way, the advice of the Yetzer Hara. None other than the Yetzer Hara telling you, you got to become a big Baal Teshuvah. You got to wake up every morning. You got to go to Selichot. You got to give charity. You got to give Maaser this year. This year you're going to be giving Maaser, 10% of your earnings, right? You're not going to get angry at your spouse. You're going to be Kovea Itim LaTorah in the morning and at night. If one makes all these commitments, I guarantee you it's going to be a failure. It's very difficult for one to take upon himself so many things and succeed. Alevai, we should succeed in one thing. Important area, whether it's a midah or a mitzvah, and we should, so the following Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we will be able to take credit and come to the Bet Mishpat, to the Day of Judgment, with something in our luggage. I remember that from time to time, when I go on long trips by myself, of course I think of my kids, I think of my wife, what should I bring them? And sometimes I don't find anything in the street, in the stores that I like. And these days the kids have everything. And my wife, Baruch Hashem, also, she has what she needs, and what she doesn't have, she buys herself. But nevertheless, you like to please your wife. You should want to please your wife, and you want to surprise your kids. You want to. So whenever I don't find anything, I make sure I spend some time at the duty-free. And I pick up whatever I can at the duty-free shop. That's like my last chance to pick up something and not come empty-handed. And that is exactly what we should be thinking about during these days. What can we bring Hashem? What can we show for ourselves so that we not come empty-handed? There is a story with Moshe Leib Nisasov, who also used to be away from home for a long time, for many months, occupied in mitzvot, and helping Jews. And whenever he would come home, his kids would run out. Imagine not seeing your dad for many months. Abba ma haveta lanu? What did you bring us? They were expecting, something. And as soon as he heard that, he began to cry. That is exactly what Hashem is going to ask us. After we leave this world, what did you bring me? What can you show? And that question is really asked every year on Rosh Hashanah. What did you bring us? What do you have to show? So, anybody want to make a commitment? Whenever I ask people to make a commitment, the way I do it is I tell people, we're going to make an appeal this year. It's not going to be an appeal for money. It's going to be an appeal for mitzvot. Jews should commit themselves to do mitzvot. And today more than ever. And the reason why today more than ever, because in the Shamayim, they're looking for more and more mitzvot, more commitments, because very soon, Mashiach is going to come. And before Mashiach comes, the Torah promises, and we were reading that in these week's Parshiyot, that Am Yisrael will do Teshuvah. The question is, how will that Teshuvah come about? Will it come about the hard way or the easy way? Because the rabbis tell us in the Gemara that if Am Yisrael does not do Teshuvah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised that they will do Teshuvah, but they're not doing Teshuvah, He will bring about a king, He will have an individual who's a fanatic rise to power, and threaten the Jewish people with decrees like the decrees of Haman al-Rasha. That's interesting, because that's exactly what we're seeing today with an individual who's a fanatic, who openly expresses his hatred towards Israel, and who's threatening the Chaz v'Shalom, go after the Jews, go after Israel. B'ezrat Hashem, of course, he won't succeed. The Jewish people are around for many, many years, and we've weathered all the challenges. But nevertheless, we take threats seriously, because we know these threats are not just fabrications, they are real, and they are me'ashamayim. Hashem uses the enemy as a whip to go after us, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's the Palestinians. We've had all of these and more throughout the history of the Jewish people, under all sorts of names, in every country that you can imagine. And they did not give us too much peace of mind. The Jew was too comfortable in Spain, they were thrown out. In Germany, wherever they were reminded that they were Jewish. They were reminded that they need to do Teshuvah. They were reminded that they have to express their desire of returning to Tzion. As we say in the Siddur, that is what they're expecting of us. That is why we mourn in Tisha B'Av. That is what we do throughout the year. In celebrating the holidays is to reminisce the relationship that we have with Hashem, the miracles that He performed for us. So we should feel a connection with Hashem, a connection that we sometimes forget or we lose because of the emphasis on materialism, amongst other things. And that is how I finished last week by explaining that this generation is less sensitive. It has less of an ability to self-sacrifice and to make those necessary changes, not because we're not aware so much. That's also true, that we don't stop to think because we're so busy and our lives are so full of shtuyot. Much more. We know here we have more time because everything is being done for us. It's an easier life, but we have less time. So that's also true, that we don't stop to focus on what we need to do. But also because it has become a very materialistic society. And because of the materialism, we have become less sensitive. We think more of our bodies, how to satisfy our bodies, to go on vacation, to enjoy life, to just buy ourselves everything that our heart desires, and if you can't afford it, just charge it to your credit card. It's become a life that of emphasis on gashmiut, on materialism. And because of that, to make a change, especially that which involves our spiritual lives, self-sacrifice, to limit our pleasures, to go to minyan, to wake up, to learn Torah, that's too hard. Our forefathers, our parents and our grandparents had a much more difficult life, very difficult life. Nevertheless, they were willing to sacrifice everything because they understood very clearly what all of these meant. They were able to cry on Yom Kippur and on Tisha B'Av. You don't hear that much crying these days. Unfortunately, sometimes what it takes is a katyusha to bring somebody to tears, to bring fear into somebody's life. And it's very, very scary when you have to be in a bomb shelter. But Hashem says, what can I do? There's nothing else that scares you. You're not afraid. The day of judgment is coming and you just make believe that everything is the same. And it shouldn't be like that. And I'm saying this to myself too, because I'm part of this generation. We cannot even fathom what it was 100 years ago. I'm not talking about 500 years ago, even 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, what it was like in Europe during these days. And it was not just a show. They actually had a burning desire in their heart, a longing to Yerushalayim, a longing to Mashiach. Their prayers were with much more kavanah. Today people rush through their prayers. They don't focus on what needs to be what needs to be said. That is the importance of these days. The importance of these days that Hashem gave us is, hey, take time. I've given you this opportunity to reflect on what needs to be perfected. And as Shlomo Melech says, "En tzaddik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yafta." There's nobody in this world that can claim that he has nothing to repair. Everybody can do something. And this is especially important during the days of Mashiach, during the end of days. As I've said many, many times, there won't be any more chances later on. And B'ezrat Hashem will cover this a little bit more about this in the next 2 weeks when we talk about the Teshuvah revolution and how the Teshuvah will come about that will lead to the redemption. Yes?
Last week, especially during the time God was cursing all this. Some people, they don't want to read that section. They don't go up to that part of it. They don't.
Nope.
They don't. This is, when we look at the 10 Commandments, 7 of them, it said don't.
Right.
Go.
Right.
Go. And so, but we never emphasize on the laws at all. Because last week, I remember that in the synagogue that they were said like that, the parasha is 5 and 6. They just give it to somebody else because they don't give it to people who have the parasha. They said it's a curse. So I think that if you're afraid of God, if you're going to do that like that, if you want to do the 10 Commandments that is talking to do it there like that, you should read it aloud, not even in a low.
Yeah, you're right. Some people just read it loud, but because it's not so good to hear the Kelalot, that is what the custom is, to go through it a little bit quicker.
That is going to scare me.
Right, you're right.
The worst thing is to fear of God, and not fear of the people.
It's supposed to be read fast.
It's supposed to be a little faster. Yeah. A little bit faster it's supposed to be read. Yeah. Because, it's things that we'd rather not talk about, but you're right.
Because we don't want to.
One should be aware of them. I just want to finish. We still have a couple more weeks to continue about this subject, but perhaps one of the most important ideas is that if one wants to succeed in the day of judgment, if one wants a better chance in making his case to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the best advice is really, Hu imachem devarim, as I started saying, is to bring with us ma'asim, commitments. Instead of just asking Hashem for forgiveness, the chances are he might say, or not him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu malei rachamim, but the prosecution might say, but wait a minute, you did that last year too. And you said that 2 years ago too, and 3 and 4 years ago. What has changed since then? Therefore, it's the most powerful impression that we can make. Our chances are much better to win and to have a ketivah chatimah tova b'ezrat Hashem if we take or we bring with ourselves b'ezrat Hashem new commitments.